gosh. Hello, happy new year. This is the first video for 2019. I hope the year has started off well for all of you guys. It is going to be a banging year. I can just feel it, but I digress. First video of 2019, a car talk, of course, and there are going to be a lot more coming your way this year. There's actually another one that's already recorded waiting to hit your screens, so be sure to stay tuned for that. But right now, here is this one. So I hope you enjoy the video and let's go. This is a car talk about goals. Okay, so I know that this is a typical thing amongst people to do blog posts and videos about goals and goal setting, and I know sometimes it can become repetitive and annoying, and I know we've cancelled resolutions. It's okay, I get it, but I feel like it is very, very important to talk about stuff like this, especially when we go into a new year, a new season in people's lives, and all of that jazz. So let's talk about goals. So I have a few points, 4 points actually, that I want to talk about, which is basically how to goal set. But I also want to talk about why we should set goals and why I set goals, basically. And yeah, so I do have a blog post that I posted. I wrote it, I think, last year or the year before that, but I'll have that linked below. That's basically the difference between goals and resolutions from my perspective, and some research that I did as well. So I'll have that linked below. And also I have written a new blog post about goals for this new year 2019, which is basically how I'm going to do the new year. So the new year 3 ways, basically. I'll have that linked below as well. So yeah, if you'd like to read more about goals and goal setting and how I set my goals, what I'm going to be doing this year, then you can head on over to my website, that is yelloworchidchild.com, but I'll have that all linked below. But right now we're going to talk about goal setting, why I goal set, and how I goal set. So goal setting for me is really, really important because I'm an organized person. I don't know if that makes any sense. I'm not the greatest organized person. I seem like a mess, but I'm not a mess. But I like to organize, I like to plan, I like to have things in motion. It's my own way of doing so. So it's not perfect, but it's a plan nonetheless. So for me, goal setting is very important, especially in the beginning of the year, to kind of plan out how my months are going to be, and how and what I expect out of the year, and how I set out to achieve such. So there are different types of goals, of course. I think most of you know that already. There are short-term goals and there are long-term goals. So for me, short-term goals would be little things like I'd like to get little tasks done. So for instance, I would like to meet up with an old friend by the end of the week, let's say. That's just a really lame example, but it's the only example I could think of on the spot. And then longer term goals would be, I would like to buy a car by this said month or date or whatever. And then that's how basically you kind of come up with your goals. You decide on your goals, then you write them down, or you tell someone about them. By telling someone about your goals, that person is able to hold you accountable to the goals that you have set. And by writing down those goals, you are able to hold yourself accountable to the goals that you have set. And that also goes with writing down the certain time frames that you want to achieve the goals, which is very, very important, because writing down a goal or telling someone about a goal, it's open-ended. I mean, I could say that I want to buy a house. Okay, everyone wants to buy a house. That's great. That could happen in the next 20 years. That could happen in the next 50 years. But if I say I would like to buy a house by the year 2020, then that gives me something to work towards. And it also makes it easier for my friends or whoever I tell, whether it's my mom, my boyfriend, my friends, or whoever, a family member, then it makes it easier for them to kind of nudge me and be like,
hey, remember that time where you said you'd like to buy a car by June? How's that going? How's the preps for that? So that kind of thing. So accountability is really, really important in goal setting. I personally believe, and that's why I'm someone who always has notebooks and diaries and all that stuff. And I was actually quite stressed when the year started, because last year when the year started, I had a diary, I had everything in motion, and I was ready for the year. This year I kind of just like, I went with the flow. I got my diary, I think I got it on Sunday, which was the 6th. So the year had already started. It was the first Sunday of the year. Got my diary, and I felt kind of like what am I doing? Like, has the year actually started? Like, I didn't feel, and I feel to some extent that's a good thing. That I kind of kicked myself a little, because I felt like I wasn't ready to start the year, which also was a bad thing, because that means that I'm using my diary and all of those planning tools, calendars and all of that as a crutch to be productive, when productivity starts with me and me getting up and doing something, not with me having a diary and saying, okay, me having a diary means that I'm a productive person. No. So there's some good and bad in being a big planner. But I think it's really, really important to have those things in place, but not to depend on them all the time. Because having a planner, having a diary, having all of those things mapped out and post-its and everything, it doesn't necessarily mean you're a productive person. It means you have certain measures in place to make sure that productivity happens, but productivity starts with you, the person. So with all of that being said, you have to ensure that you've categorized your goals into either short-term or long-term goals. So time frame is very, very important. Like I said about the house, you have to set a time. You can't say, I want to buy a house. That is wonderful, great, we'd all like to buy a house, but that could happen at any time in life. So you have to kind of stamp it a little. Short term, long term. Okay, so buying a house, long term. For some people it may be short term, depending on your finances. So you have to know yourself, you have to know your situation. If you're married, if you're engaged, or if you're in a serious kind of relationship that will be heading into marriage or something like that, then that's something that you need to sit down with your significant other and discuss as well. But for me, I would sit down with myself, maybe sit down with my parents and be like, okay, so in the next 10 years, I would like to have bought my own house, or I would like to move out maybe, and I'd like to stay in a place that's this and this and this. Why I'd like to stay in a place that's this and this and this and this. This is how I'll be able to get there. So besides time frame, you also have to kind of figure out, it doesn't have to be a set plan, because sometimes you can't really plan everything out specifically. So you can just have a rough sketch of how you're going to get there. So well, I'm a working person, so I'll be working here. I work these hours. Maybe you're not a full-time person who works in 8 to 5 or 8 to 4. So you'd need to map out how your finances are going to be set up and all of those things. So that's very, very important. And then the last point that I want to touch on is, and it's very, very important to me. It's something that I learned last year. Celebrate each and every one of your victories, no matter how big, no matter how small you think they are. Celebrate each victory. It just makes achieving something so much more worthwhile when you just celebrate it. And you don't have to go and tell the world and be like, hey, this is what happened, blah blah. If that's what you want to do, that is great. I'm low-key that person. I love to tell people when I've achieved something, because it makes me feel so great. But also, don't seek validation or affirmation from other people. Don't make that the be all and end all. Don't be someone who's going to be like, okay, so I achieved this for whoever, so now I've achieved this. Listen, I've achieved this, now they're not happy for you, now it's the end of the world. No. Your goals are for you and your future. Don't do anything for anyone else, and then when that person doesn't care or doesn't seem happy enough for you, now you're scrambling. You don't know what to do. You don't know what to say. You're like, you feel worthless. You feel useless. No. Your goals are for you, and that's the most important part. You should celebrate each and every one of your victories, no matter how big or how small, because you've achieved something that maybe you wouldn't have achieved previously. So that's a really, really good thing. You've worked hard for that, and you deserve a little bit of a pat on the back. So yeah, that's my stance on goals. I hope that made sense to you guys. I hope that you enjoyed that. I mean, it wasn't really super in depth. I'm not an expert on stuff like this, but that's just how I feel about goals. And yeah, I like goal setting. I like planning and all that stuff. I may not achieve all of my goals within a year. I may achieve more than I had even planned.